On a dime, during this pandemic, companies that could transitioned workforces around the world to remote work. It seemed impossible until it wasn't. Now, as employers face labor shortages and trouble retaining talent, another idea that once seemed impossible is getting some attention. The 4-day work week. With us now on whether it's an idea whose time has come. Literally, furthest from our studio, as in halfway around the globe, 18 hours ahead of us in Auckland, New Zealand, there's Andrew Barnes. He's the founder of the investment firm Coulthard Barnes and author of The 4-Day Week: How the Flexible Work Revolution Can Increase Productivity, Profitability, and Wellbeing and Help Create a Sustainable Future. In Waterdown, Ontario, near Hamilton, Parisa Mahboubi, Senior Policy Analyst at the C.D. Howe Institute, and in Midtown of the provincial capital, David Zweig, Associate Professor of Organizational Behavior and HR Management at the University of Toronto's Rotman School of Management. And let me just say, I'm just old enough to think it's absolutely beyond incredible that we're coming from New Zealand, which I know for people who do this all the time is nothing. But anyway, Andrew, welcome to our program and to our other two guests as well. This is pretty cool that we're coming from somewhere where it's tomorrow already. Anyways, Andrew, if you would, start us off by giving us the overview of what you have in mind.
Well, thank you, Steve. What we talk about here is a 4-day week, or I use the phrase 100-80-100. What that means is we pay people 100% of their 5-day pay. They only have to work 80% of the hours. But we do that provided we get 100% of normal 5-day productivity. And that was the policy that we introduced in my business, Perpetual Guardian, back in 2018. And this is the movement that's now, flowing around the world, accelerated post the pandemic. So that's what we're talking about: reduced hours working, and some companies actually close for a day. In our case, we don't.
How well is it working, in your judgment, at your place?
Well, what we did is we were very lucky. We actually brought in a couple of universities to do some research alongside our initial trial and then do some follow-up. We found that our staff engagement scores, that's empowerment, enrichment, loyalty, those sort of scores, we found that those scores went up 40%, 40%. Stress levels dropped 15%. More people said they were better able to do their work working 4 days rather than 5. But critically, our productivity went up 25%.
And how do you explain all of that?
Well, I have the Canadians to thank for it, frankly. Way back in 2017, I read a series of articles in the UK Economist magazine, and they were talking about British productivity, and then they were talking about Canadian productivity in a couple of surveys. The survey said that the Brits were only productive for 2.5 hours a day, and in this particular survey, they said the Canadians were only productive for 1.5 hours a day. And I thought, why is that? Is that happening in my business? In other words, do we have a lot of busyness when we have people at work doing things that are either not work related or doing things that are not that efficient when you think about output? And that prompted me to say, well, is there a better way to do it? And what would happen if I did a deal with my staff and said, actually, I'll give you an extra day off if you can work more efficiently. Think about what you will stop doing as well as what you are doing, and so that we can deliver that productivity in a 4-day week rather than a 5-day week.
We'll come back to productivity a little bit later, but let's get some feedback first of all, now that you've set the table on this idea. Okay, Parisa, first of all, let's just make sure we're all talking about the same thing here, because there is something, I guess they call it the condensed week, and this is not that. Do you want to make us understand the distinction?
Yes, absolutely. What we are talking about is people work for 4 days, but they also add fewer hours. So there is no change in the number of hours per day people spend at work. It's going to be the fewer days that also they work. So they have to complete the work within 4 days and similar hours per day as before.
Okay, you've heard the numbers that Andrew just shared with us. Do you see a downside in the kind of workplace structure, the 4-day week, that he's put in place where he is?
In my opinion, that would be wonderful if we can finish the work and remain, become more productive. If that would be an ideal situation to have a long weekend, basically throughout the year. But the problem is that whether this is something that would be possible in all organizations, whether this is something that would be sustainable, whether we are going to consider the needs of different organization and even people. Some people may not be able to deliver the work within 4 days, and they need to spend extra time to finish the work. What we can do about those people?
Well, let's ask Andrew. Is this something that you think can work across society, or clearly it's only going to work in some places but not others?
No, Steve, it can clearly work across all industries. The key is you've got to ask your employees how you're going to do it. But the thing that often happens is people say to me, well, Andrew, it wouldn't work in this or it wouldn't work in that. The reality is that somewhere in the world you will find there is a manufacturing business, there is a health business, there is an educational establishment that is doing the 4-day week. And the key thing here is that we're not talking about, an organization closing if it can't. We don't. We have to work a 5-day week. So what we do is we allow people to pick the time off that they need and that's important to them. So I think you can tailor this to any industry that you want. And I think the evidence suggests that that's the case.
Meaning it's not just Monday to Thursday and then you're closed Friday. Everybody, if Wednesday is a better day for somebody not to come in, that's the day they take off. Is that how it works?
Well, absolutely. Look, we used to have a young woman whose husband was a chef, and he had Tuesdays off. So she wanted to take a Tuesday off so that they could spend a day together. I said used to have a staff member because now she's taking maternity leave. So, in many ways, that gave us arguably our first 4-day week baby. But we have people who take a couple afternoons off if that's what's important. We also have staff who come in late or come in early and go home late. And they will do that depending on what their childcare needs are. And so we enable our staff to reduce the hours, but taking the time out that's important to them. And the organization remains open.
All right. David, put your Rotman hat on and
Sure.
Tell us what you think about all this.
And I think the idea of a 4-day work week is great. There's a lot of constraints around how it's implemented and how effective it can be, and there has to be a lot of flexibility. This is not a new idea. In fact, when I was doing some research for the show, I found that, this idea of a 4-day work week popped up in the 1950s, and people were doing research on it, in the 1970s, and it was predicted then that it was going to be this big new thing. I think what's turbocharged all this discussion of a 4-day work week is obviously COVID. It's thrown a Molotov cocktail through our office windows, and it's making us question everything. And there's no doubt that people want more autonomy, they want more flexibility, they want more freedom in choosing how and when they work. And this idea of a 4-day work week can take advantage of that desire. Now, the concern I have is obviously it has to be to work for everyone, but we also have to see whether the positive effects last over time. So, people often experience regression to the mean with their affect and with their behaviors. So we have to see whether this actually does result in long-term productivity gains or long-term benefits in terms of engagement and satisfaction.
Okay, hold off on that, whether it's good for the long run aspect of the argument for a second, because I want to circle back to something you just put on the record a second ago. You say they looked at this back in the 50s and in the 70s. So
Yeah.
Clearly there are management people who have been curious about this enough to study it. Why do you suppose that in all of these intervening decades, it's never really been tried?
Well, it has been tried. It just, for something like this to really work, you need large-scale adoption because you're asking organizations to change the way that they do business in a sense. And it has to be a very flexible model, as Andrew said, because there's so many different constraints and so many different issues to deal with when you're implementing a system like this, for it to be successful, it has to be incredibly flexible. So, what if you have a team and you've got a member of the team who decides they want to take Tuesday off when the rest of the team decides they want to take Fridays off? How does that work? So all of these questions need to be addressed and answered for this to be successful. So that's probably why we haven't seen wide-scale adoption yet. But COVID has been such a big trigger for massive changes in the workplace. It's a good time for something like this to really take hold.
Andrew, how do you get around the conundrum that David just described?
What we do is that we put the challenge to each of the teams. So I don't actually schedule anything. What I say is the key issue is that we need the same level of productivity, or preferably better. We also need to make sure that customer service standards aren't impacted. So each team understands that they need to be able to continue to service the clients appropriately. Now, after that, it's up to each team leader, to schedule who takes what time off when. Now, we don't have a situation everybody takes Friday off or everybody takes Monday off, because then that doesn't work. So if you want a Friday off, maybe you'll get Friday this week, but maybe next week you won't. You'll have to take a different day. The only thing that is consistent is where we have, as I've said, parents of kids who are at school, they probably want to work a 5-day, but they want compressed hours. We leave it to the teams to sort that out. I've never, ever had to intervene since we put this in place, what is now over 3 years ago.
Parisa, I wonder if you asked your own employer, the C.D. Howe Institute, this is something I think we should try. What do you think the reaction would be?
I'm not really certain about that, but I would say giving flexibility, that would be very helpful. This is what workers would need, even at the city, how having flexibility in terms of what time to work or from where to work, really important. But in terms of reducing the hours, that my concern is that, for example, if a work needs to be done in collaboration with other workers, if someone doesn't want to be available in a specific day, how that collaboration would work and how the work can be done. That's my concern about that. But of course, giving flexibility to workers would be increase productivity and satisfaction, and it would be something that even we have seen before COVID time and during the COVID, that hybrid model of work from home and also a combination with being at the workplace is going to be very beneficial for everyone.
Well, let's pick up on that productivity puzzle right now then. And we're going to share some numbers. And Parisa, these are your numbers provided to us on the issue of productivity. I'm dying to have people take a guess what they think is the most productive country in the world right now. So I guarantee you nobody's going to get it. Number one is Luxembourg. GDP per hour worked $93.40. And the average work week in terms of hours is 29. Now let's go down the list. Number 2, Ireland. Number 3, Norway. Number 4, Belgium. The United States clocks in at 5. Then we'll skip a bunch and go further down the list because that's how far you got to go to get to us. Australia, United Kingdom, Italy, Spain. Yes, there we are. Number 18, Canada. Well down the list, $50.90 GDP per hour worked, 32.8 hours for the average work week. All right, Parisa, come in here and tell us, in your view, what story do those numbers tell?
So first of all, I just want to mention that the data is from OECD and it's for 2015. What we see here is that it obviously highlights the productivity issue that Canada has been faced especially since 2000, because the productivity growth has been very low for Canada. It never, on average, never went above 1%. And the ranking is 18 among developed countries and OECD countries. But one thing that I like to highlight from that table is that there is no specific connection between hours of work per week and also productivity. For example, in that table, Ireland or United States, they have higher productivity, but also average of hours work per week is higher than Canada. So there is no specific correlation here between, if we are going to reduce hours of work, whether we are going to gain a lot from that.
Well, I actually wanted to pick up on that with Andrew because, in fact, Ireland is nearly twice as productive as Canada, and yet they work a longer work week. Not by much, 33.5 versus 32.8 average hours. What's the story there, Andrew? How can they be so much more productive when they work basically the same work week we do?
Well, actually, the problem with the Ireland and the Luxembourg numbers are that both of those countries are low-tax jurisdictions, which actually flow through their economies revenues and outputs which aren't actually really generated in their countries. So those are a little bit of an anomaly. But it does raise the point that quite clearly there is no direct link between your output and the hours that you work. And in fact, if we go back to Keynes, years ago was saying that actually now we probably should be working 15 hours a week in order to get the appropriate levels of output. So what we've got to look here is that it isn't linked to the amount of time you work. What the key point here is about what you produce in each hour and how do you improve what you produce in each hour. That's the challenge we've got to address. Time is a lazy surrogate for output and productivity and efficiency.
And Andrew, for how many years have you been doing it this new way with the 4-day work week at your company?
We started at the beginning of 2018.
2018. Okay, so David, tell me this. That's about 3 years worth of data, 3 years worth of experience upon which to make a judgment. Andrew tells us the productivity at his company's gone up 25% since they went to this. Is that enough time to be able to conclude, yeah, this works? You get more productivity when you do it this way.
Listen, it's one company and it's positive and certainly it's going in the right direction. But what you have to look at beneath all of this is that Andrew is offering his team a hell of a lot of flexibility and autonomy, and that's what people want, right? So they're responding to all of the flexibility and autonomy they have to decide how they structure their own work, and in response, they're actually keeping their production levels very high. So we're seeing this, everywhere in terms of the Great Resignation and everything, the post-COVID fallout, although we're not post-COVID yet, in terms of people wanting more of this autonomy and flexibility. And we're also seeing organizations recognize that they really do have to pay attention to their employees' mental health. It's why you have, big banks increasing, mental health benefits to $10,000 a year. It's wonderful, but they've also calculated that it's easier to do that or more cost-effective to do that rather than lose employees to burnout. So anytime you give employees more autonomy and more flexibility, which is what they want, you're going to get better outcomes. And so that's why if you're going to implement a 4-day work week, having a very flexible policy around how people organize their time is going to be very important to success.
Parisa, do you believe now that all of these questions, thanks to the pandemic, are in the air about how people work, where they work, how much they want to work, what they feel their labor is worth, do you think that this will kickstart a greater sense of urgency among employers to consider this idea?
It would be possible. The reason is that currently many employers are facing retention challenges, to be able to keep their employees in place. And but at the same time, we are also facing labor shortages. So employers have difficulties fill the vacant jobs. So this is really important to satisfy workers, to increase workers' retention. But at the same time, this is also, we need to think about flexibility. So flexibility is really important, but we also at the same time we want to maintain high productivity. We want to make a sustainable productive workers, and we have to think about other aspects. For example, inequality. What does it mean if some workers they are able to have that opportunity, but others, part-time workers, those hourly paid workers, they don't have that opportunity to benefit from that arrangement or flexibility. Of course, some workers would benefit from that, and that flexibility would satisfy them. But we have to think about other organization, the type of organization, and teamwork, whether it's going to be possible to complete a job when some teamwork is necessarily part of the work.
Let me do a quick follow-up with you. How about the age of the workforce? For those who are older in the workforce, what do you think the impact of a 4-day work week would be?
So I believe that would be actually something beneficial for them. What we want is to encourage people to postpone their retirement, and this is really important for our workplace. So if they don't need to work 5 days a week per week, so that would be something that they would benefit from, and they may encourage to stay longer in the workforce. But at the same time, because we are facing population aging, and also in the long term, in the next 15 years, the number of people exiting workforce would be significantly high. That would pressure on workforce. So we need to think about how we can address labor shortages, and also in terms of job training. So young people coming to the entering the labor force, or immigrants entering the labor force, they need some sort of job training in the beginning. But if we reduce the number of days people at work, so that would be also affected, and we would have some challenges in terms of on-the-job training for young individuals entering labor market, while a large number of older people exiting labor market.
Well, now that's one of the things I wanted to follow up with David on, because if one of the effects of a 4-day work week is to those who are over 60, they say to themselves, well, you know what, if it's only a 4-day work week instead of 5, I think I'm going to work a little longer. Could that have a perverse impact on getting younger workers into the workforce sooner?
I mean, it can. I mean, with the labor shortages we're facing, it's not, that big of a problem, I don't think. But, I'm not a labor economist, so it's not really my area of expertise. But, I'm getting older. I would happily take a 4-day work week. I'd take a 3-day work week, as long as I could get all of my work done. But so I can see this being a benefit to, at every stage of someone's life, there are benefits to having more flexibility around how they manage their work. Whether you're a new entrant to the workforce, or whether, you're a new parent, or whether you're an older employee thinking about retirement, there are benefits to this throughout the career span that match up with people's life stages.
Andrew, in your judgment, if the numbers all line up so positively for this idea, do you think now is the moment when it actually may catch on?
Absolutely, Steve. I think that, it was mentioned earlier, we had this sort of bomb thrown into our world of COVID. And who'd have thought that you could run a multinational from your kitchen table? But now you can. And so what we've got is a complete change. We've got not just employers saying, can we do things differently? We've got employees all around the world. I've spoken in 97 countries worldwide on this topic. And all the surveys that we're doing on the 4-day week are indicating that 80-90% of people want to have a 4-day week. So this is why I maintain that this is an idea whose time has come. But it's not just the time has come for it. We've now got the technology to enable us to do it. And that's the big change.
I guess one of the things we have to keep in mind is that there's nothing, the fact that we have a 5-day work week right now, it did not come down from Mount Sinai. The fact is we used to have a 6-day work week, and I guess about 100 years ago, enough unions made a stink and it became a 5-day work week. Andrew, in your view, is this just this is the typical cycle of the direction in which we should be going?
Yeah, absolutely. People credit Henry Ford with the 5-day week. What effectively he did is he changed his production lines to work on 5 days, Part of that was actually to increase the amount of leisure time for his workers so they'd buy a Model T Ford. There is, as you say, absolutely no science around it. And what we are now saying is that the improvements in productivity that we've seen in the fourth industrial revolution are now such that we're not actually sharing necessarily the benefits of that. The great thing about a 4-day week is it starts to share those benefits with the whole of the workforce, rather than concentrating the benefits on a few highly paid individuals.
And just finally, Andrew, one last question. The role of automation in the shorter work week, what is it?
Well, actually, I think this is one of the strengths of the 4-day week, because actually, to be honest, in my business, it isn't automation. A lot of this is eliminating busyness, things that you do that are work avoidance. And the best example of this is Microsoft in Japan, that just basically reduced the amount of time and the amount of people in meetings and got a 40% improvement in productivity. But I think the key point is that if you give people more time, then they actually have more time to invest in themselves. And it was one of the key points that was raised, I think, by Parisa, about this issue about training people and the need for education in the face of things like AI. You give people more time, they've actually got more time to invest in themselves. And especially as businesses change and our kind of economies change, the 4-day week can be a tool that assists that process.
That's Andrew Barnes. He's the author of The 4-Day Week. Joined us from Auckland, New Zealand. Parisa Mahboubi from the C.D. Howe Institute, David Zweig from the Rotman School of Management at U of T. It's been a great pleasure having all three of you on our program tonight. Many thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you.
The Agenda with Steve Paikin is made possible through generous philanthropic contributions from viewers like you. Thank you for supporting TVO's journalism.